thankful Preacher Adam is out spending time with family, and I'm very thankful to be here this morning and get to share a message with you. It's a good time, right? Hopefully for us. I think for a lot of people, as we're going into the holidays, sometimes it can not be so happy, right? There's a lot of people around us that are hurting and need and stress. For many of us, though, it's an exciting time. It's a happy time. It's a break from work. It's time with our family. We get to share in meals together and be reunited maybe with family we haven't seen much, been apart from. And so it's a good week to me. I get to go later this week and spend time with my dad, and my brother's coming into town to Lubbock, and it's just an exciting time to spend together. Even though we haven't always seen eye to eye on things, gotten along, it reminds me so much of our family here as Christians, as brothers and sisters, that we still come and share a meal. We still come together, and there's always the family members. We always do a family reunion. I have ever since I was little, multiple family reunions, right? One's from my papa's side, from grandma's side, from dad's family, and it's neat to get together at those. And as a kid, I didn't always understand some of the dynamics and who was the black sheep of the family, who was the one. Why is nobody talking to Uncle Joe? I don't. And but he seemed nice to me, and I found out, he's got a great big boat. He's taking us out on. And later, he was in prison for selling drugs. But I didn't know that. I'm just a kid. And he always was so generous, so nice, so friendly, right? These things happen, and you end up over the years where you have disagreement. I realized later in life, as much as my brother and I loved each other, and I hold him to be one of the foundations of my life. As a kid, he was 3 years older than me, kind of the perfect age difference to really hate each other, I think. Because I was old enough to be involved in some of his circles, but I was still just a stupid little brother, right? But my brother never treated me that way. He always treated me with great love. He respected me in ways that other people didn't even. He listened to what I had to say. I remember nights where we would be up until midnight, sitting at the foot of my bed with my older brother, talking to me about his life, and me talking to him about mine. And this is when, he's 16 and I'm 13. It was just an amazing time for me to have that. But then I realized later in life there were lots of things I didn't know about him, struggles and difficulties, or who he was in certain ways, that because he was just my older brother. I saw him in a light that thought he was great, amazing, wonderful, and he is. I didn't realize he had insecurities. I didn't realize that he didn't think he was as great as I thought he was. Right? And later in life, I realized a lot of times when I thought that maybe he was not the same, or was seemed as distant from me, it was his insecurities. It wasn't his lack of love for me. And all of these times of families and the interactions, I think, these are our family that some of us have grown up with, some of us have been adopted into, some of us have married into, but we still have these challenges and these struggles of understanding each other in that environment. When we live together, my wife and I are coming up on 16 years of marriage, and we're still figuring each other out at times, right? And we're still evolving and changing individually even. So what hope do we have as this body, right? How much of a challenge is it for us to get to know one another, to understand each other, to love each other? We talked in class today about Jonah, and if you weren't there, you missed one of the greatest lessons of the year. Right? Teacher was amazing. It was wonderful. I got so much out of it. Jonah, the overall point was, I love Jonah. The book of Jonah, what it has, all the emphasis in history, ideas, concepts in it. We talked about there that it expands well beyond our Christianity, right? It goes to Judaism, the Muslims, it's in the Quran. It's a huge impact. But the thing for me with Jonah is that he had incredible faith, so much faith in God that God would show mercy to Nineveh, that he didn't want to go and tell Nineveh about God's mercy and about God's wrath that was coming, because he knew and believed that God would be merciful, and he did not want that for the Ninevites. He says he would rather be dead than to have seen this happen. But he had incredible faith, so much faith that he knew in God's love, but he didn't have the love. Right? He didn't love Nineveh. He didn't love the Assyrians. He didn't love those people. He didn't want to go and share that message. One of the things that I think we struggle with nowadays, right, and part of that class and that thought is we talk a lot about our faith, right? We study the Bible, we learn more, we grow, and as Adam's been talking about for weeks up here too, it comes down to love. You can have the faith, you can have the ability to prophesy, you can have the ability to speak in tongues, you can have the faith of Jonah, but without love, what good is it? Right? Now the message in Jonah is it's still good because Jonah did ultimately what God said to do. And a boatload of sailors came to know Jehovah as God and gave their lives to him. The Ninevites repented and changed their life. So there was still good done, but not for Jonah, right? Jonah missed out on any joy, any happiness, any benefit that comes today in that. Now, I don't know where Jonah ends up in the grand scheme of things, but in this life, he was a sad, miserable guy at the end of that story, wishing he was dead instead of getting to be a part of the great work of Jehovah, instead of partnering with God and loving and getting that excitement and that joy in this life, not the life to come, in this life. The hope we have, the thanksgiving we can have, comes when we get to experience and share in that love and that joy now. Right? The good news, the gospel isn't just about getting to heaven. It's not just about salvation for eternity. It's about that you're loved right now, that you have value right now. Right? The message that you bring to people that changes lives right now is that your life can be different. Are you hopeless? Are you sad? Are you hurting? It can be different. It can change. Not once you die, although that's all great, but right now we have hope. Right now we have good news. Right now things can be different for your life. A man who I was very blessed to meet, I imagine some of you have met him and known him. He's no longer with us now, but Stanley Shipp was a man who lived this in a way that showed people the message of the good news. I had the pleasure of meeting him when I was in Lausanne, Switzerland. Some of you have heard me talk about my time with Let's Start Talking. And I was there, and it was a time where we were a few weeks in to our trip, and one of the girls on my team was ready to go home. She just hadn't really been out of her hometown. She was uncomfortable. The first time that we had service together in Lausanne, they passed a cup of wine around for everyone to have communion. This was very uncomfortable and unusual to her, right? This was drinking out of a single cup, and it was wine, which was also conflicting for her, in that we had signed a contract that we would have no alcohol, right, as we're a part of Let's Start Talking and representing that, but the church we're at is giving us wine for communion. These little technicalities are challenging for people, and for her, she was just very outside of her comfort zone. Well, it turns out Lausanne is one of the places that Stanley had spent many, many years ministering to people there, evangelizing in his mission work, and planted the very church we were worshiping in and spending time with. Well, Stanley is a man who also has influence that goes well beyond himself. Max Lucado is one of the people who went to Stanley's internship in St. Louis and spent time with Stanley, and he considers Stanley one of his great mentors and great friends. So the girl that was on our team loves Max Lucado. He is her hero. His books have changed her life. Lo and behold, she's ready to go home. We're talking about this. We're praying about it as a team, trying to figure out what to do. And come Sunday, in walks Stanley Shipp and Max Lucado in Lausanne, Switzerland. Okay. Her whole view changed. All of a sudden, she's having lunch with Max Lucado, who's signing the 3 books that she had brought with her on the trip that are Max Lucado books. And I got to meet Stanley. And such an amazing man that in just an hour or two with him, you could see why people gravitate to him and why he makes a difference. What he did in life was show people love. But he understood to do that, you had to come and get to know them. You had to live with them. You had to listen to them. There was one of the stories I read when I was looking at this that Stanley one time was doing one of the internships with a gentleman, and he came up and they were talking to this guy, and Stanley was asking, hey, what do you need? What can we do to help you? He said, man, I just need a pack of cigarettes. I need a smoke. Stanley went to the guy that he was mentoring and said, look, I don't like that he smokes, but today, showing love to him is we go get him a pack of cigarettes. That's the kind of love that he projected to people. That's the kind of influence of so many people. His ideas and things too were that it wasn't about evangelism and living a life of being a missionary. The main reason and goal that behind a lot of his influence and internship was for everyday vocational people. You know, there are doctors and teachers and others who were a part of learning from Stanley and being a part of that it's a life. And I think the heart of that is living amongst, with people. And we see that, right, in what Christ did. My Papa, I have the history of him with me today. I just received, my grandma passed away earlier this year, and one of the things I got is Papa's Bible. Right? This legacy, this history, this family, these ideas of being together, taking the time to listen, right? All culminate too in what we see in Christ. There's a book that you've probably heard of. If you've ever had kids or grandkids, you almost certainly have heard of it. But it's called Guess How Much I Love You. Little tiny book about nut brown hair. Big nut brown hair and little nut brown hair. And it's about, it seems to be, a father figure with his son, and the son telling the father how much I love you, and the father going a step above to tell the son, well, I love you this much. Right? So the I love you to the moon It's what little nut brown hair says towards the end, and big nut brown hair says, I love you to the moon and back. It's been translated into over 53 languages. It's been made into a TV series. It's been spread around the world, this idea of this very simple book. And the story behind it is an author, they came to the author and said, we'd like for you to write a picture book. And the concept is it's very, very difficult to convey a message in just a few words and simplify it down to where you can put a few words on a page with some pictures and have something that's meaningful. And this was the challenge put before him. And he came up with, guess how much I love you. So this idea of I love you to the moon and back, my thought today for you is I love you to the earth and back. And it is this idea of Christ coming to live amongst us, showing this love for us. And we talked about this morning that Jesus actually refers back to Jonah, right? He ties himself back to the story of Jonah. But look at the differences, right? Jonah went to Nineveh ultimately after trying to run from God, being thrown over a boat, swallowed up in a big fish, still going, oh, God, how can I please you? What have I done? I love you. And it very clearly says God told him, do what I already told you to do. If you want to show thanks, if you want to show love, just go and do what I asked you to do. Whereas Jesus, we see saying that he willingly wanted to come and share a message of love with us. He wanted to be amongst us, live with us. How many of you have ever been in a situation where maybe for whatever reason you were going to have to go live with an aunt or an uncle? Maybe you were going to have to move in with another family. Maybe it's just the first time you had a roommate. Maybe a roommate you didn't know real well. The sense of concern, unease, nervousness, living with people you don't know. What's it going to be like? Jesus came knowing that we weren't going to ultimately accept him. Christ knew that ultimately that was where he came to. Now, there's debates from people on whether or not how much knowledge Christ had of being the Christ when he was first Jesus. Right? How much did this little boy know about the future to come? And people can debate that. But at the end, he absolutely knew what was facing him. Right? There's no debate when he's in the garden saying, let this cup pass from me. And sweat like blood is coming off of him. That he knows what's facing him. I've always grown up feeling and thinking, and I don't know why, I don't know if it was taught to me this way, I don't know if it's just my own, what came out of my head that made sense. I've always looked at that as, don't let me have to die on a cross. Don't let me have to go through this struggle. And I believe that that's part of it, but since then I've come to see so much more. see, Jesus came and walked and lived and loved and had family and friends and brothers. And not only did he originally choose to come and say, I love you, I will go to the earth and back. Even at the end, he still didn't want to go back. See, I think he wanted to stay with the people he loved. He wished there was a way that he could still be with us a little longer. I think and propose that part of his prayers were saying, I love these people. I love them. I love them enough that I will leave them. But if there's any way, if there's any possibility that I can stay with them, then let me. And to this day, I believe that he is longing to be with us again. You see, he was a man. And the beauty of Christ, of Jesus, is that he was a man, and he died, and he was raised. He was raised in his body. He was raised as a man so that we would know one day the resurrection could be true for us. But he hasn't departed. He hasn't been separated from the Jesus who walked amongst us, who loved us, who loved these men, who loved his mom, who understands what it means to love us. Right? Like Stanley, I think there's many times when Jesus goes, you know what? I really don't like that you're doing this, but I'm going to give you whatever it is today so that you know that I love you. I'm going to fill a need for you so that you know that I hear you, so that you know that I'm listening. So that maybe tomorrow you'll be a little bit closer. Maybe tomorrow you'll be a little bit stronger. Maybe tomorrow you'll be able to love somebody the same way. And understand that this is the love I brought. There's a movie out, or I don't know if it's still out, and I don't recommend it for people as a overall. There's a lot of strong themes in it. But I personally loved the overall movie. And it's based on a book. The book may be better, may be worse, I don't know. So it's always risky anytime you mention any media from somewhere like this, so I just put that disclaimer. It is not a Christian movie. It is a secular movie. But it's called Jojo Rabbit. And it is the story of a young Nazi boy who is a fanatic, hoping, desiring to serve Hitler, and finds out his mother is hiding a Jew up in their attic. And he feels it may be his responsibility to take care of this issue, but he's torn between his mother and his allegiance as a 10-year-old to the Nazi cause. And the story ultimately is the relationship between this young girl and this boy, and how you overcome differences and how you overcome hate by living with somebody, by listening to each other, by learning firsthand who a group of people are, who a person is, and changing your mind about those things. And one of the things in there that I loved is at the end there's a quote from Rilke, a poet, that he wrote many poems. One of these is the Book of Hours, and that's where this comes from. And Rilke says that there was a spiritual experience and a connection with God that brought out these poems. But I want you just to hear this one. Think about, just listen to the words. God speaks to each of us as he makes us. Then he walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like a flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. You may not be a lover of poetry. It may not be what speaks to you, but the thoughts in there, the idea that I want to share and get across and what hit me, right? More than anything was the let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. We like to look at the beauty of love. We like to look at the love stories. Many of us do. Some people don't. Some people love the dark stuff. I love everything. That's why this speaks to me. I've mentioned it before from up here. I love emotion, right? I love feeling. That's it. I love feeling. Right? There's no more to it. When I tell people, oh, I love feeling, they're waiting. Well, you love feeling what? It's like, no, I just love feeling. That's it. I don't, sadness, happiness, joy. I love sharing in that and seeing that. I love it through movies, through poetry, through people. Let everything happen to you. Beauty and terror. In love, it's easy for us to look at the beauty, the side of having relationships, family. We want to often ignore or overlook the sad parts of it. We wish that they didn't happen many times. We want to move past that. But the reality is one of the other favorite movies of mine, that love is pain, Highness. It hurts. It's ugly at times. It's painful. Right? We see that from the cross. If we want to take up our cross, if we want to be different than Jonah and get to experience the joy in this life, there's hurt and pain that can come with that. I think Jesus experienced more joy at times than anyone else on this earth. But he also experienced more pain and suffering. His death on a cross wasn't a death that was the most miserable death you could imagine. I'm sure it wasn't at all a pleasant way to die, but there are many ways that can also be terrible, horrible, and suffering and pain. But the hurt and pain of seeing the very people you love, right? Giving them the thing that is going to help them see and understand and hear and know your love for them. Giving them what they need to appreciate how much you love them. For Jesus, that was to the earth and back. Coming to the earth wasn't enough. Coming to the earth and back is how much he loved us. He gave himself, right? Do you think that the Savior Dying on a cross is what Jesus would say, well, I'm so thankful this is what you wanted. Right? What do you need to see my love? What do you need to know I love you? I need you to die on a cross. I need you to die. I need you to leave this earth. I need you to get out of my life. Okay. If that's what it'll take, that's what it means to love you today. That's what I'll give you. So how hard is it for us to get that message? For us to live that way and listen to the people around us. Understand what Nineveh needs. Nineveh needs somebody to go and tell them of the coming doom so that they can change. Understand what the man on the side of the road that Stanley walks up to and says, man, I just need a pack of cigarettes. Understand when somebody says, I need space, I need time, I need distance. What is it today? As Adam said, what does love demand of me today? Not tomorrow, not next week. Recently I was talking with my wife and she had the opportunity to go do something to show love to somebody that night. And there's all kinds of other things that need to be done for the coming week. The answer is, and what she did was, I'm going to go show love tonight because tonight, right now, I can do that. These other things, they're showing love to other people later. So, Lord willing, I will have time later. Tonight, this is what I need to do. A lot of times we wrap up our love, our ideas, or what we should do in things that are for the greater good, for the later purpose, for what we think will come to pass. I'm not saying that there aren't times or reasons or logic maybe that some of that comes into play. But if you have an opportunity right now to love somebody, take it. And you will experience the joy. You will get to partner with Christ. And you will get to change the world around you. There's no telling what kind of ultimate impact a life like Stanley's has made in the world. People can go on to do amazing things that you will never see, just like Jonah. Jonah, unfortunately, again, didn't get to partner with it or be excited about it or share in it, but a whole group of sailors gave their lives over to Jehovah that night. He will use you if he wants to. If you're willing to follow, you can either be a grumpy, upset, frustrated Jonah, or we can get the message of Christ and say, you know what? I'm just going to love. So I hope that as you're going through this week, through the holiday season, I mean, we know there are ample opportunities to share Christ with the world around us, to share love. It may be inconvenient, it may be out of our way, it may not be. That's the other side. Sometimes it's just good things, right? I get to love my wife and I enjoy that I get to do things for her. That's not a burden for me. Sometimes love is a burden, right? Sometimes it is a stress and a sacrifice. But more than anything, it's keeping your eyes open, your ears open to the world around you, and hearing what is it that love demands right now. And then being willing to give that to the point of